hearing officer for tonight's hearing. I'm assigned to Public Works at the project management, assigned to the ESER bond program. And so the purpose of today's hearing is to hear the department's recommendations along with appeals from the public, and then to make a recommendation to the director. So ultimately, the decision about how this will proceed will be the director's, whether he chooses to accept, reject, or modify that order. But the purpose is to get everyone's input and make sure that your concerns are heard. So the way the hearing will proceed is I'll ask the department to go first, and then I'll ask for, if the appellant is present, to respond, or members of the public. I do ask when you speak that you state your name and spell it for the record so that we have it correctly. I do like to put people's names down correctly when I report back to the director. Also, I think there's an email address that was on the screen earlier. If you'd like the results to be sent to you, I ask that you send your email address in. Ideally, we would like to have any comments done orally so that they can be recorded. But we will try to monitor the chat room. That is not the preferred way to make comments or suggestions or questions, but we will do our utmost to do that. And I just ask for everyone's patience as we work through these video hearings. It's not ideal, but we work hard to get it right. So we will respect your time, and I ask that you respect everyone else's. We have 5 matters on the agenda tonight. Our clerk is Cerise Waiters. So thank you, Cerise, for helping out. Thank you, Clint, for helping out from the director's office. So with that, can we start with the department on item number 1? Item number 2, order number 204152, 900 Van Ness Avenue in the median. Consider removal of 2 street trees with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Go ahead, staff.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So the order number 204152, 900 Van Ness median, and this is to consider the removal of 2 street trees, they're median trees with replacement, and the staff approved the removals and the public has protested. So there are 2 very healthy, very mature silver dollar eucalyptus in the median. Most people in San Francisco know about Van Ness median. It's a very old project that's been going on. People have started their careers and ended their careers on Van Ness before it was even built. A lot of work has gone into planning the Van Ness median. It had gone to tree removal hearing in the past in 2016, and the scope of tree removal was reduced at the time in the hopes that some of the median trees could survive the excavation. So while these removals are later than the initial removal, every attempt was made to try to save the larger median trees. In this case, it was determined that, if you can see how large these trees are, they're very large. They could span the entire road if they fell over. So the amount of root plate excavation, the amount of excavation going around in the critical root zone it's very close to the base of the tree. It's like 2.5 feet from the trunk. And if you look at the size of the tree, that would leave very little structural root for that size of tree. So the critical root zone should at least be the same size of the canopy, if not twice as large. And unfortunately, the amount of growing space that would be left for these trees, the amount of space and the amount of root impacts, coupled with how large these trees are, it would essentially act as a lever arm. The canopy would be a very large sail, and the amount of roots left to keep a tree that large in place would not be able to support it. And we looked at how could you save these trees? Could you pour over the roots? And in order to support a bus that is going to be pulling up into these medians to load passengers, you would need, I believe, a 10 to 12 foot, 10 to 12 inch deep concrete pad. And the engineers will speak to that after this, but essentially, yes, these trees are healthy. It was very unfortunate to have to approve the removal of these trees. But upon closer examination of the construction and the plans that were put in place, it's just not possible to save these trees. So they have been isolated and protected for the duration of the project until the project had come to this median, looked at it, and decided that it would just be way too much of a risk to excavate under the drip line of these canopies. Considering how large these trees are, again, how tall they are, and the proportion of structural root remaining. So yes, excavation is going to occur. You can see the red dot there is basically kind of where the excavation will occur in proximity to the tree. The bus pad is 10 inches and 12 inches for aggregated concrete base. So compacted aggregate base. So basically it has to support a bus full of people frequently. And the trees will be replaced with another large stature tree. And that concludes our presentation on 900 Van Ness. So to be consistent with how we handle these cases, this tree is just too large to be able to retain with the construction.
Great. Ms. Nauberry, would you please state your name and spell it for the record, just so we have it?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm Susan Nauberry. I'm the BUF representative.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And you mentioned there was going to be something from, was there an engineer report, or is this slide the engineer's report?
The engineer on the project are here, so they can speak to some of the more technical details.
Okay, if necessary. So with that, is the appellant here to speak toward, or the person that made the protest? Would they like to speak? If so, raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay. If not, is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this matter? Okay, I see one person with a hand raised, two people. I don't see whose hands they were.
I'll go ahead, John. I went ahead and unmute. Go ahead, John.
Okay,
Good evening. I'm concerned about, again, that, these trees are like round 3 or 4 on Van Ness of removing of trees. And you still have a lot more trees in the medium. And if these two are going down at that location, what's stopping the other ones that you have in the medium going also down too? If you're not going to, if they could be, slowly have protested hearings on these. I'm concerned about the welfare of the existing trees that, as was stated, that survived the 2016 hearing. I don't understand why you are now taking out, again, trees that were kept and now are being taken out because somebody looks at them now and decides that the roots are going to be hampered. So I'm concerned about this loss of canopy on Van Ness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nolte. The next speaker, please.
And that's Josh. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
Josh, your last name again, please. I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Sure. My last name is Klipp, K-L-I-P-P. I will just note that actually members of the public are allowed, if they would like to speak, make public comment anonymously. So just that's just as a matter of rule. So
I appreciate that. That is absolutely correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Sure. And also, before I start my public comment, is the planner here? Is there somebody from the city that wants to talk before I say something that may be out of ignorance?
I think Ms. Nawberry made the representation that if we need to have the engineers speak, we'll call upon them. So there's no, I don't think it's possible to speak, to ask a wrong question or make an inappropriate comment.
Okay, thanks. All right, then let me get started. Just as a sort of preliminary note, and I know I've mentioned this to Cerise before, and so just to kind of bring it up, that when the decisions come out, I would greatly appreciate my public comment being accurate and accurately attributed to me. Then regarding these specific trees, so this project has been in the works since 2003. And it's really, I mean, somebody made the point that Tesla was founded the same year that this project began. And it's hard as a member of the public to understand why, for a project that has been going on for over, 17 years, the removal of these trees could not have been foreseen. Just what is the competence level of the people responsible for putting these plans into effect that cannot understand what construction techniques or what impacts of construction or excavation might have impacted these trees. And that was especially important because, as anyone familiar with the history of this project, and I think John Nolte is alluding to, the number of trees that were coming out as part of this BRT project was in litigation for 2 years. 2 years, and it even went before the Board of Appeals. And so there was plenty of time to figure out what needed to come out and what didn't. And so it entirely undermines public trust to have this sort of picking away at the remaining canopy. And I would also point out, as somebody who did a public records request on this, that there have been numerous instances of contractors' failure to protect trees, sometimes to the point of fatally, and having to be fined for that, and additional removals for failure to protect trees along the way. So this is incredibly undermining to public trust, not to mention a real disappointment in the trust that we have in our city officials to understand the scope of a project and what the results of their work will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. Are there any other speakers on this? I see one hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. It's last name or first name Panos, and
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm one of the engineers in the project. My first name is Panos, as you see on the screen. My last name is Panagopoulos, spells P-A-N-A-G-O-P-O-U-L-O-S. I know this project has been on for a very long time, and I share the concerns that voiced by the members of the public. What I can add to this discussion is that there's always some degree of unforeseen circumstances regarding how the routes are actually configured when we encounter them. In this case now, we have seen the routes because we have uncovered part of them in order to construct the median curbs, and they are located in positions that we will have to, or have already cut for the trees to be, for the median to be constructed. So as it is now, it appears that the trees are inherently unstable. An independent arborist was called in. He made the assessment that these trees are inherently unstable now, and therefore should be removed. It is his professional opinion, after making a detailed assessment of these two trees. He considers that their failure is quote unquote imminent. And it's made worse by the fact that the median is narrower. What I want to add, though, is that there is regarding the project in general, is that there is a very large number of trees that are planted. So in terms of the trees on the sidewalk and the trees in the median, it looks, if the numbers show, as I have them in front of me, that we'll be planting another 100 trees on the sidewalk. That's a 30% increase of what used to be, and we'll be we will have an increase of 120 trees in the median. That's a doubling of the number of trees in the median. So we are planting new trees, 180 on the sidewalk and 200 in the median. Taking into account the ones removed, it's the numbers that I told you. So regarding the concerns about the loss of canopy, yes, we have removed trees, but we'll be adding much, much more. So we'll have a net increase that'll be 30% on the sidewalk and more than double in the median. Of course, these trees will take some time to grow. So,
30 seconds, please.
Done. Thank you.
Mhm.
Very good. Thank you, sir. You made reference to an independent arborist report. Could you please forward that to the department so they can include that in the final report that they have?
Of course.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this matter?
I just want to clarify that I have read the report. Our staff is aware of that report. So
Okay, so you have it for the record if somebody needs it.
yeah, and if you would like it, let us know. But we have assessed that report, and it is an arborist that is well known in the arboriculture community.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Then sir, that won't be necessary to forward it. We have it. Great. Anyone else would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, then I will close this item and we'll move on to the next item. Item number 3 on the agenda is order number 204153, 2300 Mason Street, to consider removal of 2 street trees with replacement. Staff approved the removals and the public has protested. Ms. Strawberry, do you want to speak, please?
Yes, so order 204153, 2300 Mason Street. It's the removal of 2 trees. They are replaceable. And we approved the removals and they've been protested. So it's 2 blackwood acacias, Acacia melanoxylon, and it's this one here you see in the foreground and the one on the left. The primary concern is the larger one, and that's because, as you can see, there's a seam kind of in the middle. It's kind of been slowly splitting for a while, and as we've been monitoring it, we have been pushing back on removing this for a while, but it got to the point where we started to see some kind of space in between that crack, so you can kind of see the sky through it. And it has a lot of end weight. It's starting to decline. So the property owner who lives behind the tree there has been very concerned about it, contacting us for a very long time. So we've been reassessing it. It has basal decay. And here you can see the union on the left. It has included bark. It has codominant stems. And a codominant stem is when the stems are close to equal in size. There's not one main leader. And what happens is the tension wood, so angiosperms operate by building tension wood. They're on the top part of the limb. And that kind of holds the limb onto the main stem of the tree. But in this case, you have 2 trees building tension wood in the main union. And what that does is build included bark here. So they start to push each other apart. Acacias are very fast growing, so they become very large very quickly. They're great for growing trees quickly, but unfortunately, because they spend most of their energy growing, they don't compartmentalize decay very well. And so the tree on the right, I met the arborist supervisor on the site when we were looking at the trees and deciding, like, what are we gonna do about these trees? And all the arborist supervisors on our staff are very, very experienced. They're journey level arborists. It takes a lot to become hired as not just an arborist in the city, or tree worker, but to become a supervisor on the tree crew. It takes a lot of experience. And so we were looking at the tree on the right, and he was concerned that when the tree on the left was removed, the wind patterns on Mason Street basically caused this tree to fail. And if you look at it, it's very, very spindly. And so it basically has very low taper. And so what you want in a tree is very high taper. And what helps produce taper is when a tree sways in the wind. And this tree hasn't had very much wind exposure on the other side. And I believe it's also because in the past, on the right side of it, which the tree is now gone, it was outcompeted, so it had to grow straight up. So trees with a lot of fierce competition don't put on very good taper. Sorry, one more thing. Here on the left, you can see that, or on the right, you can see there's been a lot of sidewalk repair. Acacias do not do well with sidewalk repair. The sidewalk repair was done a very long time ago, so it's had a good amount of time to decay. And unfortunately, when the repair is done, the city did not have the maintenance of the trees. So we were putting that burden on the property owners. A lot of property owners do not want to take on tree removal. So they will repair the sidewalk as best they know how, and sometimes roots will end up being cut. And I believe that this repair is done in 2008. So we were not involved at that time. So here's a uplifted sidewalk from 2008. And just to show you all that's been repaired. The number of roots cut is unknown, but acacias do not compartmentalize decay very well. So if you cut their roots, they generally tend to fail. And then we did have a failure 2 years later on Mason Street. So here's a screenshot of the service request. Those two trees are gone. So the third tree down is this tall spindly one we've been concerned about. But the two trees in the foreground are actually gone. So they did fail after the sidewalk repair. The other concern with this taller tree is that it has codominant stems up in the higher part of the canopy. And once exposed, and you can see that there's included bark. I probably should have gotten a slightly better photo closer up. It's pretty high up though, a little difficult to get, but it has included bark and it has a seam building, and it is above the roof line. So the concern was that the wind pattern would cause a major stem failure from that height. And when you have a lot of exposed trunk and a tuft of canopy at the top, what you're doing is creating like a lever arm or a sail. So both trees can be replaced, and I believe this tree needs to be shifted a tiny bit, but they can be replaced at the site. So that concludes our presentation at 2300 Mason.
Okay. So these removals were based on a public request of the property owner?
Correct. Yeah, so there's no construction or anything going on. The property owner is very concerned about the trees, and we just respond to service requests and initiate removals if we can't find a way to work with the tree and prune it, retain it safely.
Okay, and who would, it says with replacement, would the city replace the trees, or would that be a property owner responsibility?
The city is responsible for replacing the trees, and I will be completely honest and say that I don't know the timeline of replacement. I do know we have a replacement contract in place, but I'd have to check and see if we could add these to that. So,
okay,
a little bit unknown right there.
Okay, all right, very good. You're done. You're done with your presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. So we'll move to public comment. I see one hand raised.
Okay, we have Lance Carnes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
Yeah, Lance here. I'd like to share my screen, please.
Okay, just a moment. Okay, you've been promoted. You should be able to unmute yourself and go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, I'm shared and unmuted. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, so the two trees at 2300 Mason Street, one is called number 3, one's called number 4. Technically, it's called 2310 Mason Street, number 1, but we'll use your nomenclature. The first point is that will be wind exposed when tree 4 is removed, but I dispute that. Also, number 4, according to the Citywide tree survey in 2017, that tree was supposed to be removed 4 years ago. And I'm wondering why it's still in place. Let me see. So DPW has at its disposal 2 databases. One's called the Citywide Tree Survey on the top here, and the bottom is their regular DPW database. On the top, you'll see the 2 trees, 2300 Mason number 3 and 2310 Mason number 1 is the old name for tree number 4. And the recommendation at the time was to remove it. And down here on the DPW database, you see the same 2 trees, except they're called different things. Notice that these things have latitude, longitude, and you can take this little Excel database and you can pump it into Google Maps, and you can see the trees as they're on this along the street. This is tree number 3. This is tree number 4, and the contention that if this tree is removed, it'll stop blocking wind from this one. It'll be wind exposed. The wind direction in San Francisco, almost everywhere, is westerly, comes from the west. So there's no way this tree ever blocked wind for that one. Also, we plotted the trees from the DPW database, and you'll see that tree number 4 got shifted over to this thing. So we'll just ignore the database data from DPW database. Here's again a picture of the trees as they showed before. One on the left is number 4, which is supposed to be removed 4 years ago. Then this one here is a perfectly fine tree that sways in the wind on its own, and it's been that way since it's been that tall. So in summary, the tree data is inaccurate. Tree number 4 does not protect tree number 3 from the wind. Tree number 4 is supposed to have been removed 4 years ago. And the 2300 Mason number 3 tree was deemed okay by the 2017 Citywide survey. So to the hearing officer, I'd like to recommend that you delete 2300 Mason Street number 3 from the removal order. And let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Carnes.
And order Buff to
that's
correct the
brilliant.
GPS and other information in their database.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Let's go ahead and have Ravi. Ravi has his hand up. You want to
Okay.
go, Ravi?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, so I am one of the property owners of 2300 Mason Street. And I remember that we had taken out one of the trees about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. That was then our responsibility because the tree had been deemed quite unstable at that point. These 2 trees that we are talking about today are both, over 60 feet tall. And our building is less than 40 feet tall. So with due respect to the last speaker, we do get plenty of wind coming from the west. And trees do sway. And I've noticed myself the debris that we collect on the balcony that we have facing west. And all the debris comes from the tree. I had called in an arborist or a tree man who had come, and the whole idea was to try to see if we can prune it at that point so that there was not, it wasn't that top heavy. And he looked at it and he said, save your money, my friend. That both your trees are sick and you better call Department of Public Works and have them remove it, because very likely they're going to fall on your building and it's a big liability. Our building is, barely 12 feet away. The trees are 60 some feet tall, and it's a real scare during the windy days and the rainy days. So we, with due respect, we hope that you can maintain the order in place and have the trees removed as soon as you can. Thank you, sir. Thank you both.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Next person to speak, is that Mr. Clip?
It can be if I'm the last one with my hand up.
Well, you got your hand up here. You've got the floor, Mr. Clip. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you everybody for your previous public comments, and Susan for your presentation on this. One of the, I guess I have two questions, well, two sections of questions, let's put it that way, two categories. One is, I kept hearing, these two trees are already there used to be two trees here and now those are gone. And so I'm wondering if there are, because I don't, I'm not getting out to that part of the neighborhood these days. Are there currently existing empty basins there right now, or viable spots, because sometimes they get paved over, where trees had existed in the past and should be right now? That's my first question. And then my second question is, I noticed the department's use of the word replaceable, and I'm wondering, does that mean they are going to be replaced? And I think Ms. Naubury kind of addressed this when she said would see if it could get onto the contract or the order, however you phrase that. But I guess I'm wondering if there's any sense of when that's actually going to happen, because again, us tree advocates out here know that the city has effectively cut its entire street tree planting budget, or at least nearly all of it. And so I'm wondering, what's the department's sense of when that's going to happen? And as an addendum to that, will there also be large stature trees going in here, since this is obviously a public right of way that infrastructurally can manage that? So those are my questions.
Okay. Ms. Naubury, well, I guess you're not required to respond to this, but
Yeah, I can address.
If you would like to, that would be.
That planting contract went out to bid, I believe, a week and a half ago, and they are very slow. They go out to bid, and then we have to wait for the contractor to mobilize. So it does have to plow through some bureaucracy, but it did actually get written and is going out to bid. So that's good news. And we do have to check if we can add those trees to the scope. I don't think the list is full. We're only starting with 100 trees, and we're starting them in like Coal Valley area, because we're trying to stay out of areas where FUF is planting in. So we're starting with 100 trees, but I believe that they have the capacity to possibly do 300. But these are not going to be at the top of the list, and we still have to check if they can actually get on the list. And we can also ask if there's bandwidth to plant these sooner outside of the contract. So we can definitely ask on all those accounts. And the empty basin, so one of the trees did get replaced, but there is one empty basin there. And I'm struggling to remember which one is empty and which one is there, but there is, I believe, a bronze loquat that was planted there. And sometimes people don't like losing trees in front of their property. So sometimes Buff will plant a tree, and property owners with a promise to water will water, but we don't require that. We wait for people to actually offer that, because it's the city's responsibility to actually do it. But essentially watering is our main issue. But yeah, so I will ask, and yes, one of the trees is, I believe one of the basins is empty.
Okay, so, I mean, technically it's outside the scope of the hearing, but Ms. Strawberry, if you want to follow up directly with Mr. Clip afterwards as you answer. Is that okay, Mr. Clip? It's probably been turned off, so I'm hoping that's okay. All right. Are there any other speakers on this? I see Mr. Nolte's got his hand up.
Good evening. I noticed on the first slide of the first tree that it had brick around the tree. And so that was kind of confusing that you have one tree, if they're supposed to be at the same property, you have brick on where the concrete is supposed to be, and it's brick. But so my question is there still brick there? And if because you could be taking out the tree, you're going to have to deal with the bricks too, because it's part of the tree well, and also taking out the stump. So I'm a little concerned about how that would work, and also hearing that you have a contract for 100 or more trees being planted. Is part of that contract for those trees to be planted in the city? Would that be the contractor also be required to water all those 100 plus trees that they're planting? And so that would be the biggest part of the contract, would be the watering part, because that's like 2/3 of the cost of a tree is the watering. So the public wants to know that questions. Thank you.
Okay, again, that's Mr. Nolte, that's kind of outside the scope of the hearing, but Ms. Lawberry, if you want to respond, please do. The idea is to get information.
We have laborers that can deal with the bricks and everything when they remove the stump. And we do, the contract does require watering by the contractor.
Great, okay. Thank you. Anyone else would like to ask questions or speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we'll close this item and move on to the next item. It's number 4 on the agenda. Order number 204154.
I'm sorry, John. Don, I'm sorry. We do have Ravi had his hand up. We have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I apologize.
It's my
I
fault.
apologize, Mr. Oh, you already spoke, but go ahead. The idea is let people speak. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about it, but I wanted to say that I did want to cooperate with the city, and if necessary, even take in a few, couple of lines of water underneath the ground if possible. And I'm an architect, by the way, and I'm able to do that. So I can bring in my workers. So if I need to cooperate with somebody in the city, if you can just let me know who I should speak to, that'll be great. Thank you.
That's very kind of you, sir. And Ms. Nawberry has your name, and if she needs to work with you on that, I know that they'd be happy to do that. So that's very good. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll close item number 3 and we'll move on to item number 4. 501 Funston Avenue, to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement. Ms. Nawberry.
Thank you. This is order 204154, 501 Funston. And this is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement. And staff approved the removals and the public has protested. And so we have there are multiple trees in this park strip, but this is just tree sequence number 6. And so it has decline in the upper canopy. And it does have some fruiting bodies on large scaffold limbs, which indicates that there's decay inside these large limbs. And this is an acacia, so the species failure profile is whole tree failure or complete root failure. But that doesn't preclude limb failures. And so this one there's a fruiting body on this large stem here, and you can also see that these are codominant stems. So again, going back to that other acacia where codominant stems, they're competing leaders. And so they put on growth in between the union and they push each other apart. And it also prevents the growth of tension wood, which also where the main stem pulls on that tension wood and holds that wood in place. So this decay does, and it's like a very large stem. So a hollow limb like that is a concern. So our inspector was concerned about this. We probably need to go back and check and make sure it didn't fail. We haven't had time because we've had thousands of failures across the city, and this could be one of them, but hopefully this one held in place. Either way, the tree has, we've checked on this tree multiple times and it hasn't come back with the rain, so it's not going to come back. And its structure plus the decay does indicate that it is a concern, and it does indicate that that limb could fail and it is in decline. And this is tree sequence number 8, so it is also in decline. And you can also see the main stems don't have very much canopy either. So what remaining canopy is there does act as a sail. It's a lever arm. It's something they talk about a lot in tree risk assessment, that when you have a lot of canopy at the very top of a tree or at the very end of a limb, that produces a lot of end weight. It also acts as a sail and mechanically acts as a lever. So this one has had some recent limb failures, and it is also in decline. It's also a very busy road. This one is particularly concerning because the failure is in that main union. So the tension wood is essentially gone, and it's kind of just being held in place by the remaining wood on this other side. But that main union is usually what keeps that limb in place. So we're concerned about leaving this one in place on a busy road here. And it also doesn't have a very good main leader. So it has, again, codominant stems and a failure in the union. So here's more pictures of the included bark. And when it has that kind of twisted growth, we are also more concerned. We're also concerned about torsional failure. And so again, when the canopy acts like a sail, we're worried about the canopy kind of twisting and failing, and we've had mid-stem failures too. We had an acacia on Masonic that failed that way. So we're concerned about that on this tree as well. This tree is like a pocket of decay, another pocket of decay on another large limb where it has codominant stems again. And then it has some dead wood overhanging the sidewalk. And that concludes the presentation on these trees. Both sites can be replaced, but again, we don't know about the replacement at this time.
Okay, Ms. Strawberry, there were several letters that were submitted in regards to this thing. They asked, are there alternatives, severe pruning, other measures. What another writer asked about present danger to the public or imminent root failure. And another one asks if they are removed, will the stumps be ground below grade and will landscaping be applied, etc. And then there's something about a water leak that may have been nearby. Would that have contributed to the thing? So just for the record, if you could kind of respond to this.
I don't know about the water leak, but basically because these trees are in decline, if you were to aggressively prune them to reduce the weight, first off, there's not any canopy to reduce to. So there's not going to be any canopy that can assume the role of a leader. And then the other thing is doing large cuts for reduction is kind of like a last resort and it leads to a lot of decay as well. It's not a good thing to do for acacias, and definitely not good for trees that are high risk areas. And then, sorry, what was the other question? Like, what can be done to save the trees? Basically,
Yeah, asked if there's anything to be done to save the trees, and then there was another one saying, is there root failure? Do we know that?
I don't see evidence of root failure per se. I didn't see any root plate lifting.
Okay.
And it's more, I think in this case, I'm personally more concerned about limb and torsional and mid-stem failure more than root failure. But when you have decay in large stems, it does eventually make its way down to the roots. And there could be some decay, but we need to do some probing to find out. But again, because these trees are declining so much and because they don't really have any canopy to reduce to, you can't really even prune them to save them. So even if we were to not find decay at the roots, I still would be very concerned about retaining these trees.
Okay, now I think the last question was, when the tree is removed, is the stump ground down, or is it just removed, or how's the stump treated?
Yeah, we will grind the stump deep enough for a 15-gallon tree.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So with that, are any of the appellants, would they like to speak? Would any member of the public like to speak on this matter? I see one hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So Susan, I know you've talked quite a bit about contracts and, timelines and things like that to get replacements. I guess I'm wondering if you could offer any comment on the species of the tree that may replace, because again, this looks like, a pretty prime spot for a large statured tree, in contrast to most locations for trees along public rights of way where there is a lot more constriction. So yeah, I'm wondering if you can comment on that, and if there's any way that the department could commit to ensuring that the replacement will be, whenever it comes, will be a large statured tree. Thank you.
Okay, again, I'll just say for the record that it's outside the scope of the hearing, because that's not what's before the hearing officer. It's about removal and things. But if you're able to comment and you wish to comment, Ms. Strawberry, please feel free to do so.
I don't see any high voltage lines here, so it's our practice to plant the largest stature tree possible where there are no constraints, especially somewhere here where it's not even adjacent to someone's home. We would want to maximize the amount of canopy. And we can commit to the largest stature possible here for this site.
Okay, and Mr. Clip, I would just encourage you to remain in contact with Buff on your interests on what would replace this tree if the director decides that it's appropriate to remove it at this point. So it's clear you have a good working relationship. Does anyone else like to speak on this matter?
Looks like we have Mr. Nutley as well.
Mr. Nolte?
Good evening. First of all, nobody's really said that these trees are located on 19th Street that runs to the Highway 101. And so you have plenty of room there on either side of the freeway. So my point is, as stated before, that and it should be part of the decision, because you're saying as you're replacing these trees, it should be part of the decision whether or not a large stature trees are replaced for these trees because they're in the medium of next to a freeway. So I would request that, because again, you're removing large trees that have been there for a number of years, and they have plenty of room to grow. So that's my public comment on these two trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nolte. Are there any other speakers? Okay, so hearing none or seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5 in the agenda. Order number 204-155, 3751 20th Street, to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Ms. Nalberry?
Let's make sure. Yeah, so 204-155, 3751 20th Street. And so we are considering the removal of one street tree with replacement, and staff approved the removal and the public has protested. And this is related to a tree removal permit. So the property owner is renovating the property and adding a garage. The inspector determined that construction at the property is not necessitating the tree removal, and he has drawn what he believes is the driveway curb cut. And so the tree is not in the footprint of the driveway. And so it's a ficus tree, and the property owner has voluntarily submitted the tree removal permit application. And the inspector looked at this tree, kind of sat on it for a little bit, and then determined that upon reviewing again, that the tree had fairly poor structure in comparison to other ficus. And this tree does have a failure profile of large limb failure. And this tree, you can see the lighter colored sidewalk. There's been some sidewalk repair. So multiple instances of sidewalk repair is a concern with ficus. It's not as prone to failure as acacia, but they are prone to root failure as well. And here you have the main branch union. There's several scaffold branches originating from the same area of the trunk. So this also has several codominant stems. And unfortunately here, the main leader is a lot smaller than the scaffolding limbs next to it. And so as we mentioned before, that tension wood that attaches to that main stem, it's basically growing and competing with this leader that is actually somewhat suppressed. And so as this limb on the left and on the right grows, it'll start pushing away from that main stem. And this is some of the most common failures we have in the city are ficus trees. So basically you have multiple competing limbs, a lot of included bark, many opportunities for limb failure here. So here's the other side. You can see the included bark on either side of that main stem, and then the main stem has codominant leaders as well. And then coupled with the weight of this canopy, it elevates the risk rating of limb failure here. So when you have when you have a lot of end weight on a tree, you have that lever arm, when you have included bark, you don't have a strong base for it attached to attach to. So the concern is that, and if you were to reduce this canopy, it's possible that you would introduce decay by making large cuts, and the amount of repeat pruning required to keep the tree a certain size might kind of negate any sort of like growth rate it would have. So with all these reasons and the fact that the property owner, I believe, apologize, I have to go back into my notes, but I believe they've offered a 36-inch box replacement tree. So the property owner will be taking on the removal and replanting and watering of the tree.
Yeah, the 36-inch box is on a following slide.
Oh, here we go. Yes, sorry. So yeah, the property owner has promised a 36-inch box tree. And so the inspector looked at the replacement feasibility and determined that it could be replaced. And the property owner must replace the tree because of the review with the building permit. And the plans have shown that the tree is feasible, and so the property owner must comply with any approvals.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, so what you're saying is that the dramatic or heavy pruning would not solve the problems with the structure of the tree.
It wouldn't, to solve those, like the main structural issues, you'd have to remove the actual large stems that are causing, that are competing with the leader, and that would be a huge loss of canopy. And then the other method, which would be to just reduce the ficus, that would be basically reducing a lot of, like, essentially topping the tree, which is not sustainable. We also don't like to leave topped trees around and have people repeat topping them, because it's not something we want to use to maintain trees. And it also introduces decay and can lead to even more failures. So the inspector determined that the amount of repeat pruning required to keep this tree from having hazardous limb failures would outweigh the ability to just remove the tree. So the inspector basically decided that upon weighing like the reduction and pruning, he believes that replacement is a more feasible option. And there's no high voltage lines here, so you could also put a tall stature tree here.
Okay. And then when we're requiring a 36-inch box, and I know the to get the sign off on to close the permit out, we'll have to put that in. Will the department be able to opine on what's placed in or have some kind of input or?
Yeah, we have the authority to determine what species is planted.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Ms. Notberry?
That's it.
Okay. So with that, with the property owner, is the property owner here or present or online? Would the property owner like to speak? I see one hand up. Ms. Mason?
Yes. I'm actually not the property owner, but I'm the agent of the property owner. Yeah, I think I don't know if this was on your paperwork or not, but he originally had said he wanted to do a jacaranda tree, which was in our permit. So I don't know if that needs to be noted at all. Or he'd also offered to do a magnolia. He liked that one for if a larger stature tree is requested.
Okay, thank you for that information. I'm not competent to speak on that. Maybe Ms. Notberry wants to opine. Or not. Thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to add, ma'am?
Nope, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
So with that, we'll open it up to the public. Is anyone from the public wish to speak on this matter? I see one hand up. Mr. Clip, it looks like you're up.
Okay, thanks. So I see this as two separate issues here. You've got construction and then you've got the tree removal. And I'm saying that these are two separate issues because a layperson's interpretation of that drawing does not make it look like the tree is actually in the way of the driveway. And as somebody who's been to basically every tree removal hearing for the last 3+ years, I've seen plenty of drawings where that has not been the case. So it doesn't seem that the construction necessitates the removal itself. So that takes me to the second issue, which is the health of the tree. And as anyone at the Bureau of Urban Forestry could tell you, our urban forest plan says that 6 to 7% of our existing canopy right now is ficus trees. And so unless this tree is on the high priority removal list, which the city has, then it should not come out unless the higher priority removal trees have been taken care of, especially at a time when we can ill afford to be losing any kind of canopy in a city that doesn't have the money to replace these trees and has the smallest canopy of any major city in the United States. I would also point out that there was a study done in 2010 regarding the addition of private parking in San Francisco specifically, which found that every time you add a garage, you increase the number of trips that somebody takes in their private vehicle, which in turn increases the amount of CO2 spewed out into our environment. And anyone paying attention to the Department of the Environment's current community engagement process on the climate action strategy could tell you that travel is the #1 polluter in the city of San Francisco, and therefore reducing trips is its top priority. So it's kind of a double whammy to take out a tree for a garage, that not only are we adding carbon, but we're taking away the mitigating and we're failing to achieve our mitigation goals and failing to achieve our sequestration goals at the same time. So unless this tree is at the top of the priority list, I would respectfully object to its being removed.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. Let me, so based on the, let me just clarify some things so I know what I'm writing up. My understanding was, Ms. Nauberry, the representations were that the tree was not a construction issue, was not in the way of construction. Is that correct?
That is my understanding of this case, that the actual that the tree does not make the construction impossible.
Okay. And then let me also, since the homeowner has requested the tree removal, would the homeowner be responsible for the cost of removal and replacement, or is that going to be a city expense?
The homeowner is solely responsible for all costs associated with this permit.
Okay. All right. Very good.
And they must keep the tree alive until they transfer the maintenance over to the city when the tree is established.
Okay. Did I see something that they're going to water it also?
Correct. They're fully responsible for the maintenance of the replacement tree and its establishment. So that could take 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Does that clarify that? So I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any, would like to speak on this? I see a hand up. I don't know who. Mr.
Go
Nolte,
ahead,
is that you?
Mr. Nolte.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Yes, I have some issues here going on with, again, the tree being removed, and then also properties in San Francisco. The average keeping of a property is like 7 years, and you're talking 5 years, to maintain this tree. And then that time the property could change hands. So how can you put a condition on the property owner to maintain this tree for 3 to 5 years when it could possibly change hands between that time? So that's my question to why should not the tree be taken out? And also you have prune trees all over San Francisco that are ficus and reduce the canopy. And that was experimental that you've done, and I don't see why you can't do it to this one on 20th Street too. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nolte, I'm sorry, I missed that last part. Can you just repeat that?
They have done experimental tree pruning to ficus trees all over the city for the ficus trees instead of taking them out. So they've already established a protocol of not to take out all of the ficus trees in San Francisco that were marked, to be taken out. So the city has already established a protocol to prune back the trees to lower the amount of canopy there is, and that's in Hayes Valley. That's been done very successfully.
No, thank you. I wasn't clear, and I want to make sure I got what you said correctly. So I appreciate that. Thank you
very much, Mr.
No, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else would like to speak on this matter? Anyone? If not, then I will close it, and we'll move on to item number 6, which is the last item. Order number 204-156, 7 and 11 Hayman Avenue, to consider removal of 4 street trees with replacement. Staff approved the removals and the public has protested. Ms. Nauberry.
So basically, this is a very small block. It has a fairly narrow sidewalk. It's about 9 feet. Not too narrow for replacement trees though. And they've experienced a lot of limb failures here. And in addition, a lot of sidewalk damage. And so the inspector went and looked at all 6 trees and determined that 2 of the trees could remain. And in addition, the property owners on Heyman Street have committed to watering all the replacement trees. So they've had a lot of limb failures here on Heyman Street. Again, it's kind of a narrow street. It's in Bernal Heights area, and it's got some narrow sidewalks as well. And so it also, in addition to just having a lot of large canopy in a narrow area, the limbs get hit a lot by traffic. And because these trees have fairly poor structure, it has very large limbs that are overhanging the road, which means they can't really get good clearance without doing very large cuts. So the inspector, he met with the residents on the block, and pretty much the entire block is supportive of the removals. And because they all push so hard for the removals, they have also agreed to help water replacement trees, which essentially helps mitigate the removals immediately, although the replacement trees will not be the same size as mature ficus. So here's just the email correspondence where the whole neighborhood is essentially written to our inspector and asked him to work on removing these trees, and also in writing agreeing to water the trees.
Okay.
So the inspector, here's 11 Heyman, and this has very similar structure to the other ficus. It has very much larger non-leaders. So the main leader here is very small, and it has competing limbs that are not the main leaders, and very low canopy inside the limbs. So it has a lot of end weight again. And again, that lever arm, that's how a lot of limb failures occur. And again, the species failure profile of ficus is limb failure. And it has codominant stems. It has pretty poor structures, pretty typical of ficus we see fail in San Francisco. Here it has a very dense canopy. I think that probably contributes a lot of the end weight that causes some of those limb failures. This one's definitely the worst tree. It's 7 Heyman, tree number 1. This one has a lot of decay already in that main union. This one is definitely, it's definitely the worst. I would not be surprised if that decay has made it down to the roots. And again, because this whole block has had repeat sidewalk damage and repeat sidewalk repair, I would be concerned about this tree in particular. So it has a pretty large canopy with very unstable limbs, and the amount of weight on limbs with this much decay does concern me. The structural integrity of this tree is pretty poor. The vigor is incredible, which is very typical of trees that tend to have large failures. You have trees with very heavy, large living canopies and very, very, very poor wood structure. And that is a perfect storm of large limb failures and large whole tree failures. We see a lot of trees that whole tree fail this way too. So this is 7 Heyman, tree 2. It doesn't have very much interior canopy, which is a concern. You can see it's very clear and there's not very much green. So it'd be kind of difficult to reduce this tree. It looks very full on the outside, but we kind of call that like an M&M. It has like a candy coated shell of leaves and the inside is just bare. So it makes it very difficult to reduce because any reduction cuts would result in almost 100% removal of canopy. And that is essentially topping, and it's not legal. And it also leads to, this kind of decay you see, which again, this kind of decay is also caused by limb failure. So it's not necessarily topping that causes this, but large limb failures leave wounds that expose the main stem. That's what one of our main concerns with codominant stems is when it tears out open the main stem and exposes it to decay. So this is tree 3. This has a very similar structure to 11 Hayman. It has 2 very large codominant stems. And it does have another stem kind of bisecting that. Again, all these stems are going to be competing with each other as they grow, and they push each other apart. It has a very large canopy, so it's very heavy on limbs that have poor structural integrity. So that concludes the presentation on these 4 trees. The inspector determined that the codominant stems coupled with the species failure profile and the neighborhood's concern, the entire block's concern about these trees coupled with their commitment to water, he determined that he would approve these trees for removal and replacement.
So very good. So just for the trees that are being removed and replaced or being recommended for removal and replacement, is that on the city's dime or property owners?
So the city would have to remove these. This is more of like a constituent concern. But the main issue really is, and also actually, so this whole key map, this whole area is coming up under contract. So the city is already going to be in this area soon. Coincidentally, our key map grid cycle is up for this area. So the contractors are already going to be here. And so the contractors, they've already have this budgeted into the bid. But yeah, the city, it is going to be paid for by the city.
Okay, very good, thank you. So with that, we'll open it up to the appellant and members of the public. So I see 2 hands are up, so.
Go ahead, I believe we have Stan. Go ahead, Stan.
Okay.
Yes, hi. I was going to share my screen too. If that's possible.
Okay, we can do that. Just 1 second. You'll receive a change that you've been added as a panelist, which will then give you your ability to share your screen. Do you have that, Stan?
He's on mute. Can we?
Yes, you can unmute Mr. Stan, and then you should be able to.
Yeah,
show
sorry. Let me try it again. It's just
There we go.
Doesn't seem to be sharing.
That's all right. Take your time.
All right.
Do you want me to share the screen?
Yeah, is it possible to have my husband share instead?
Sure, whoever wants to share. We're all trying to work through this. We have some time.
Eric, he's Eric Chan.
Okay.
Is he in the,
Yes, he's on the call.
okay, well,
he's on
have
the
him
Zoom call.
raise his hand. His name is
Raise your
Eric.
hand, Eric.
Okay, great. I will take care of Eric real quick. Okay, Eric, you should be a panelist now, which will give you the ability to share your screen. Okay, and do we have Eric? Eric is
Sorry, guys.
Yep,
He's-
yep.
No problem.
You're both unmuted. Now we just need to.
Yes.
Yes, looks like we have issues with sharing the screen.
I can just go.
There you
I
go.
did.
There you go. Mr. Chan, we see you, so that's.
Oh, okay. We have issues sharing the screen.
I sent the file over to the email address that was provided. I don't know if you guys could bring it up yourselves. Do you have that?
I think they're looking for it, so.
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't have
sorry.
it ready at the moment, but
So how about this, Mr.
John, you know what? If they want to send it to me, they can send it to me instead of the buff email. If you could send it to dpw@sfdpw.org. I can have access to that email inbox and I can pull it up if you'd like.
Okay, so how about if we do this? So that you don't feel the pressure, Stan and Eric, why don't we move on to, I need to see another speaker. We'll hear from them while we get to the other thing up. How's that?
Yeah, first, could you repeat that email address? I'm sorry.
Yes, it's dpw@sfdpw.org.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we'll I'll go ahead and have let's see, we'll go ahead and have Josh go ahead and speak while we get you guys queued up, okay?
Great.
Go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Great. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
All right, cool. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, and I want to give a little bit of context to the neighbors who I think are on the call as to why I'm asking these questions. I am part of a group along the 24th Street corridor in the Mission that is going to be doing some neighborhood volunteer watering. And it's a very sizable undertaking, and we've gotten a lot of questions from the department about the process. And so I'd like to pose similar questions here regarding the watering and what process is in place to ensure that this happens. So
Okay.
for instance, as a neighborhood, maybe one of the neighbors can answer this, but I'm going to just put them on the record.
Okay, Mr. Clip, let me just say that, so the questions go to the hearing officer, and certainly neighbors are, I'm open to letting people respond, but they're not required to respond at the thing. And I mean, I think it's important to put these on the record so they're aware of what they're getting into. But I just want to make sure that we're not going to, that you're aware we're not going to force anyone to respond to these questions. So
I understand the protocols in terms of public comments, and so I am simply putting these on the record.
That's great. Wonderful, sir. Thank you.
Sure. So here they are. Whether a neighborhood leader has been identified, whether the neighborhood has the equipment needed to do the watering as well as easy access to water, if they have training in how to take care of new trees, how the watering of the new trees will be tracked by the neighborhood group. Since this will be the city paying for the trees to be removed and I presume replaced, with the neighbors being responsible for bringing them to establishment, what are any consequences if there's a failure to establish or a lack of care, how that's going to be managed. And then the last, this is just editorial, apropos not of this agenda item, but this is the third tree removal hearing in the month of January. I know this is a thankless job for the hearing officers and the other city employees, so I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for your work.
No, and Mr. Josh, or Mr. Clip, thank you very much, because I mean, I think what you said is important for the neighborhood to understand what they're getting into, because a lot of times people volunteer for things and don't do that. So it's important for you to put that out there. So that, I appreciate that. Okay. With that, are we ready for Stan to speak? Do we have his stuff rolled up?
Okay, I don't have anything from Stan or Eric in the inbox.
Okay,
yes.
He sent it.
Yes, it says that they sent the PowerPoint.
They sent it to DPW. I don't know if on the second time you didn't put director's office. Maybe it needs to be.
No, I don't need. I just needed to go to dpw@sfdpw because
okay.
The agenda.
That's what you sent it to.
The appellant to send it to the Bureau of Urban Forestry, but Cerise doesn't have access to that now, and I have access to the DPW that I can put up on the screen for them. Okay. Well, so I'm going to check one more time, gentlemen, if you could.
Sure. Okay.
Oh, I see it. I have it. Stan slides. Bear with me. I just have to download it. It just came through a second ago. And Cerise, we'll go ahead and start the clock once I get everything up.
Okay.
I want to do. Okay, so I have the screen up. Let me just go ahead and share real quick.
Next slide. Of course.
My idiot.
All right, here we go. And the gentleman, feel free to speak. And then if you want me to.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sure can.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you when to go to the next slides. I really appreciate that. Sorry for the technical issue. But good evening, everyone. My name is Stan Gabraszewski. I'll spell it Gabriszewski. My husband, Eric, and I are the owners of 249 Coleridge, that greenhouse that you see there. The side of our home is adjacent to what I'm calling the first 3 ficus trees. I forget what the numbering was,
Okay.
but it's the 3 closest to Coleridge. I'd like to start by saying that we, like other homeowners along Hayman, are a group of responsible and concerned homeowners. We love the shade and the beauty that the trees add to our neighborhood. But these particular trees on our tiny, narrow street are just not appropriate. And in fact, they're dangerous. We very much need them replaced, and we will willingly care for the new ones that would be planted. So the ongoing problems that we've experienced, if we go to the next slide, please. So the tree's massive size on our small street creates a very dark and hidden environment that encourages frequent littering, dumping, human defecation, drug use, and car break-ins. Next slide, please. We've seen this slide, this picture before, but it's a public safety hazard from falling large limbs and from large amounts of also wet leaves that create a slipping hazard. We've had several accidents, people slipping on leaves. Next slide, please. Also, sidewalk damage from the large roots creates a tripping hazard for pedestrians. We did make pretty significant repairs back in 2015, but there is already more damage as seen here. The tree roots have also caused damage to the water and sewer lines of several homes on the block, which required tens of thousands of dollars in repairs on those lines. We also fear that our house foundation is at risk. Next slide, please. There are transportation issues in that the trucks cannot pass due to the leaning trunks and large limbs of the trees. Next slide, please.
30 seconds.
Also, due to the leaning trees, trunks and limbs, the weekly street cleaning vehicle cannot pass closer than to about 10 to 15 feet of the curb. So every Friday, Eric and I rake all the leaves and the trash that's accumulated out to the middle of the street so that the sweeping vehicle can pick them up. Last slide. Just that we care about our neighborhood and we will water the replacement trees. Just to quickly answer that question, we have hoses on both the front and the back of the house that could reach those 3 trees that are adjacent.
Thank
Very
you,
good.
Mr. Gabraszewski.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, I see hands up. More speakers?
It looks like we have Jeff Walton.
All right, Mr. Walton, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm Jeff Walton, W-A-L-T-O-N, and I'm the homeowner at 11 Hayman Avenue. I've lived here since 2002 and plan on living here for quite a while. So Dan did a great job at sort of presenting our issues, as did Mrs. Newberry. So there are the safety issues with the limbs falling and the roots that are gargantuan and popping up the concrete. We've repaced our entire sidewalk once already, which was thousands of dollars, and it's already popping up again. And he covered the sewer issues where our sewer was replaced before we moved in, and then our next door neighbor's sewer was replaced soon after we moved in, with roots that were really as large as our head that were invading into their sewer lines. And then our next door neighbor on the other side just replaced their sewer this last year. Crime was covered. I mean, it's just comical sometimes what we find. I think there was a full bicycle actually stowed away in one of the trees and up in the limbs. So all of us are on board on our street. We've had street meetings about it. I have a hose that very easily reaches my tree well, and I'm happy to water and happy to learn from anybody that will teach me how to grow a healthy, happy tree that would be appropriate for our tiny little street and tiny sidewalks.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Walton. I appreciate it. Are there any other speakers that wish to speak? Anyone else? Anyone come in late and wish to speak on any matter that was before this hearing?
It looks like we have Lance. Lance, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. You can hear me?
Yeah,
I'd like to share a screen, please.
Okay. 1 second. Go ahead, Lance. Lance, your microphone is, yeah, okay. All right, go ahead with the time series.
Okay.
Mr. Crons, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. We see your slides.
So Lance, do you want to go back to the beginning? You were on mute.
Yeah. If you could, you can hear me now and you can see my slide. Okay. Yeah, can we start now?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I'd like to comment on these trees for an odd reason. 7 and 11 Heyman Avenue were unfortunately listed in the tree removal notifications in 7 Heyman Street and 11 Heyman Street. And I noticed Ms. Nobberry also called it Heyman Street. It's not the correct name. And you may think that's a piddling little remark. Let me just go ahead and show you some other problems we had with Buff recently. I believe the Bureau of Earth and Forestry uses these handwritten tree removal forms to manage their trees. They have 125,000 trees in their inventory, and somehow using handwritten paper forms doesn't seem very useful. And it perpetrates bad information. You have a pretty good tree database, and you have a citywide survey to draw on. Use that. That way we'll have accuracy when we're told about trees, locations, etc. The other thing is that we had 2 hearings recently, one last Wednesday and one today, Monday, and there have been 5 trees that were misrepresented or mislisted. The first one last Wednesday was 1360 Fulton Street, where the Buff person presented the tree, and it took someone from the public to point out the tree had been removed 9 months earlier. 80 Junipero Serra Boulevard, DPW database GPS shows trees in a different location than the representatives indicated. 1119 Rhode Island Street was incorrectly posted as 1119 De Haro, and DPW has already agreed to go repost this tree. 2300 Mason Street, I mentioned earlier, had a zillion little problems with the location of the trees and other data. 7 and 11 Heyman Avenue was posted as 7 and 11 Heyman Street. And so by the same rule that Rhode Island is going to be reposted, I think 711 Heyman should also be reposted. So, and I think, the title of this thing says it all. Use the DPW database to avoid errors. And that's the end of my comment.
30 seconds. Okay.
And here's, if you want to follow along at home, you can find a copy of my slides here.
Great, thank you very much. Is there, I see one more hand up. Is there someone else that wishes to speak?
Yes, that's Mr. Nutley. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is John Nolte. First, a couple of issues here. These trees were probably well, it's already been said by two of the property owners, the trees were already on the street when they bought the houses. So therefore, they were aware of the trees and have been more or less taking care of them since the trees were, they look like 30-year-old trees. So the next issue is, again, these are ficus trees and why they can't be pruned back. We've already had this spare, we've already done pruning on ficus trees to experimental pruning on them to cut back the canopy. And that would take care of the issues that they were talking about of not enough light and also deal with some of the issues that they're dealing with, saying that there's not enough light on the sidewalks and so forth for people to walk and slip on leaves and so forth. So it would help with the, and also probably would, you could also deal with the, since DPW is in charge of maintaining the streets, the limbs of the trees too, they should have already dealt with the, there's a height of how high the trees go into the roadway. So that would take care of the street cleaning issues. So all these issues could be taken care of without removal of the trees. And I think that might do some good for the neighborhood to show, at least to experiment before removal. And then lastly, it'd be the last resort to actually to remove the trees. I didn't hear anybody say that they did, if they actually had these meetings, they should have talked about these issues too. So I didn't hear those issues being talked about by the current property owners on that street. That's my comment.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nolte. I see one more hand has gone up. Is there a speaker?
John, I believe that is the property owner. If they've already spoke, but if it's your call.
Sure, if they want to, yeah, we want to give people their opportunity to speak. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to respond. One slide that Stan showed earlier is the main trunk was leaning towards the street. So even if we trim the tree, the trunk is still leaning forward. And with the cleaning truck, we talked to them, there was an issues that they could not even get close to the curbs because of the leaning trunk. So that's one major issue. And another major issue is when we purchase our properties, like we are not true experts, so we have no knowledge of how invasive these trees are. So now as like a property owner, we start learning about like the problem with ficus trees, and we are dealing with it. And we're here, and we want to plant trees and replacement. We are not here to cut down the trees and just have a clean sidewalk. Just want to raise that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to speak on any matter before? So with that, Clint, I want to thank you for your help behind the scenes, but you made it to the front, so thank you very much. Therese, our clerk, and Ms. Nawberry from Buff. And thank you mostly to the public for your time and interest in this matter. And the way I will do this is I will submit my recommendations to the director's office. And then, as I noted before, it's up to the director to decide to agree, disagree, modify, change, do whatever. So at the end of the day, it's the director's decision about how we'll move forward. And then if you want to submit your names to that email address, you'll be notified when the director comes out with the hearing results. So with that, I will thank everyone for their time and wish you good health and to stay safe. So thank you.